Hello and welcome to you all. We're so thrilled to see such a great turnout for the first production in our series on imagining a better online world, exploring the decentralized web. This is a series produced by Internet Archive, DWeb, Library Futures, and Metropolitan New York Library Council. My name is Davis Aaron Anderson. I am Assistant Director for Programs and Partnerships at Metro, as we're called. In a moment, I'll kick things over to my director to share exactly who we are. But first, I'd love to hear from you all out there. So if you could open up chat and let us know your name, let us know where you're from. And since my reading list is a little short right now, could you let us know what you're reading right now? It's winter here on the East Coast, and I know we're all bundled up inside with books. So I'd love to hear from you on what you're reading. So while you're all finding your chat and letting us know those things, I'd love to introduce my director, Nate Hill. So over to you, Nate.
Hey, everybody. How are you? Welcome. My name's Nate Hill. I'm a houseplant enthusiast, as you can see. I'm also the executive director of the Metropolitan New York Library Council, aka Metro. Metro is a service provider for libraries, archives, and cultural institutions based in New York City. We do many different things for our members at Metro. Everything from managing a book delivery network to supporting local hospital libraries with state funding, to hosting and supporting repositories at academic libraries and other institutions, to engaging in and supporting digital equity work with our public library systems. One really important thing that we do, and the reason you're all here today, is we offer educational programming for librarians, archivists, and other knowledge workers so that they're as highly skilled as possible when they show up for work every day. So I am truly delighted to partner with the Internet Archive, DWeb, and Library Futures on this 6-part series, exploring the potential of the decentralized web. Throughout my career in libraries, which is a bit longer than I might want to admit these days, I have always looked to the Internet Archive as leaders in applied technology in the library and cultural heritage space. It is no surprise to me now to be looking to them to help clarify a topic that is at times confusing, controversial, and full of promise, but it also requires serious thought and informed, respectful critique. So thank you so much to the Internet Archive and their affiliates. And thank you to all of the speakers who they have brought together to share their work and their thoughts today. For those of you who are new to our programming at Metro, welcome. We're pleased to have you, and I encourage you to look to metro.org/events for more really interesting programming that Davis Aaron Anderson and her team, Mary Bakia and Tracy Mark, curate. And for those of you who are returning, our old friends, thank you so much. We love having you here. Please enjoy the presentation and come back for the rest of the exciting series. We're going to see you soon. Thank you. Back to you, Davis.
Thanks so much, Nate. I must say it's wonderful to see so many friends in chat. So hello to everyone who I know, and thank you so much for your support. This and every other event in Metro's suite of programs is governed by a code of conduct. My colleague, Mary Bakia, will drop the link into chat so you can see what that looks like. Mary and our colleague, Tracy Mark, who are on the team with me, will be making sure that conduct stays civil in the chat and in the Q&A. So please do take a look there and see exactly what sorts of behaviors we prefer to see on our channels. Mary will also drop a link into chat with the list of upcoming events in the series. So please do check those out. We'd love to see you come back for the remaining 5. We also, if you registered before this morning, we have sent you a guide, a resource guide that accompanies this production. So you'll see a link in the chat there with the guide if you did not receive it, but do peruse that. That was expertly created by the team here. So thank you everyone who wrote that guide, and thank you for perusing it. Lastly, I wanted to say that we at Metro pride ourselves on bringing sort of tougher topics to our community. We love to get into the tough topics because it's important for all of us to be well-versed and to feel like we are a space where we can share. I know that the future of the internet is a very, very big deal for all of us. Indeed, here we are talking to you through Zoom. And we're very excited to provide a space where we can share, but we do ask that you maintain civility and definitely let us know your thoughts as we go through the program. So with all that said, I'd love to turn things over now to Wendy Hanamura, who I'm meeting just now through the series. So I'm very honored to be working with you, Wendy. Wendy is Director of Partnerships at Internet Archive, and she planned the first Decentralized Web Summit way back in 2016. For the last 6 years since, she's helped to guide the global growth of the decentralized web. And now she's here with us today, producing this 6-part series, Imagining a Better Online World, Exploring the Decentralized Web. So thank you so much, Wendy, and I'll turn things over to you now.
Thanks, Nate and Davis, for inviting us to come talk to you all. And it's so exciting to see Melbourne's in the house, and Victoria, Canada, and Louisiana, a couple people, and New York too. Welcome to the session kickoff, the Decentralized Web, an Introduction. This is a topic that I love, that I care about very much. So let me tell you a little bit about the hour ahead. Here's the game plan for the next 60 minutes. I think we should start by establishing some terms, some common vocabulary. You hear it bandied about all the time, Web 1, Web 2, Web 3. Well, what do we really mean by that? Then I've invited my boss, a visionary of library and technology, Brewster Kahle, to share why he so long ago identified these sets of technologies to be important. And we want these sessions to be not just lots of words coming at you, but that we want you to be able to see this decentralized tech in action. So we have 2 demonstrations of technology. You don't have to be a coder to use them. You can use them right now. But first, I wanted to kick us all off with this video clip from HBO's Silicon Valley, Building a New Internet. And I have to warn you, being HBO, there is some profanity. So let's watch the clip.
All right, let's do an exercise. You've got unlimited time and resources. You can build anything in the world you want with your compression, anything at all. What's it going to be? 3, 2, 1, go.
No, I don't.
Go, go, go.
You said I have unlimited time.
Now, now, now.
A new internet.
What? Why?
Okay, well, I haven't really thought this through, so... Okay. I own a telescope.
Of course you do.
And I brought it out one night to look at the full moon.
Of course you did.
And I got to thinking, wow, we put a man on the moon using the computing power of a handheld calculator. And then I thought, okay, there's literally millions of times more computing power in my phone, and that's just sitting in my pocket, doing nothing, right? So then I thought, there's, what, billions of phones all around the world with the same computing power, just sitting in people's pockets. So then I thought, what if we use all those phones to build a massive network? And here's the kicker. We use my compression algorithm to make everything small and efficient, to move things around. And if we could do it, we could build a completely decentralized version of our current internet with no firewalls, no tolls, no government regulation, no spying. Information would be totally free in every sense of the word.
You want to build a new internet.
Yes.
Richard, I like it. That I would fund.
Well, I don't know if it's possible. And
Look, if this new internet is the man of your dreams, and this is the man that you want to fuck, then you need to fuck him. That man, I will pay you to fuck.
Well, that was on TV in 2017. And a little bit of pride here, we had Mike Judge, the showrunner, come to our Decentralized Web Summit to learn more, to write these things into his scripts. But now today, what is this, 4 years later, the decentralized internet, actually the decentralized web, has gone beyond Hollywood. You're starting to hear it all around you in social media. Buzzwords, decentralized, Web3, distributed. Well, what do they actually mean? Let's start with some basics. Centralized versus decentralized. Okay, on the left, centralized networks are all controlled by a central authority. It can be a company, it can be a person, it can be a government, but that authority has to maintain the code. It has to maintain the servers and protect and harbor the data. Now, most of the internet that you and I work on today is run by decentralized applications. Ultimately, though, we as consumers have to trust that that central authority is going to do what's in our best interest. Now, over on the far right, you have distributed networks. Okay, as you see, all of the nodes in a distributed network are interconnected. They can communicate with one another and work to achieve some common goal. Computation or data can be distributed across all of these nodes, but ultimately one entity can still control all of the nodes. That takes you to the center graphic, the decentralized network. It looks a lot like a distributed network with the computation running on these interconnected nodes, but here's the difference. In a decentralized system, no one node can tell all the others what to do. It's working in a peer-to-peer network, but no one node has control over all of them. So let's look at some examples. Facebook, your classic centralized authority, run by an all-powerful company at the center. Amazon Cloud is a distributed network where you have computation and data distributed across many nodes, but ultimately Amazon can control them. And finally, a decentralized network like IPFS, the Interplanetary File System. Now, this is a protocol that distributes data across many nodes, but ultimately its creator, Protocol Labs, doesn't control where you put it. It doesn't control how long it stays there or the work that's being done. Okay, now let's talk about Web 3. What does it mean? Well, I think to understand Web 3.0, you have to go back a little bit in history. So let's start with Web 1.0. 1991, Sir Tim Berners-Lee creates the World Wide Web. That is what we think of as Web 1.0. In this web, everyone becomes a publisher. It's very decentralized, quite democratic. Typically, a user creates a self-hosted website back then. What does it have? It has hyperlinked text and some files and some applications, but it is primarily read-only. It's static. And that's why people call Web 1.0 the read-only web. Then you get to about the year 2000, where Web 2.0 starts to emerge. You start to see these big platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and suddenly people can interact with the content. We call this the social or the read-write web. This is the web, Web 2.0, that we're still using today. But what happened is that in order to have ease of use, we have ceded control to these big platforms, enormous platforms, and they manage our access to information, our privacy, our security, and our data. Finally, you have Web 3.0. That starts maybe around the same time as blockchain in 2009, 2010. I think that the central innovation of Web 3.0 is that all of these technologies are verifiable. Some call this a trustless system because in Web 3.0, you don't have to trust Facebook anymore. The trust lies in the data on the blockchain. The blockchain is verifying the data itself. Now, some people also throw into Web 3.0 the metaverse, AI. It's still very controversial about what you mean when you say Web 3.0. There's a lot of debate, but take a look at this. This is a person I respect quite a lot, Jay Graber, who's now leading Twitter's Blue Sky project. Jay's point is that Web 3.0 is not just blockchains. She says, think of it as the self-certifying web. What does she mean by self-certifying? Well, one, you have these cryptographic keys that users use to identify themselves, and that the data has these immutable hashes so that you can always track the data. I think if you have to look at this graph, the important thing to remember is this, that in Jay's conception, Web3 is much more than just blockchains. It includes blockchains, but there are lots of protocols in there that don't use blockchains at all. Things like IPFS and Hypercore and SSB, which stands for Secure Scuttlebutt. And Hypercore and SSB are governed by nonprofits and cooperatives. They're not big companies. So if that is Web3, what do we mean by the decentralized web? Well, take a look at this. If you think of our current web as a stack of technologies, what if you could decentralize everything in the stack? Starting with storage, you could store the data across decentralized nodes. You could make the transport layer, like IPFS, decentralized. You could have applications that run on decentralized backends, much like all of the dApps of Ethereum. You could have decentralized identity, self-sovereign identity, where you hang on to your own data instead of ceding it to all these other companies. Payments, instead of paying with a credit card or PayPal, what if you could make tiny micropayments to creators themselves? And some even believe that we could decentralize governance of organizations, that through things called DAOs, you could use technology or you could use crowdsourced systems to actually govern the organization. Take all of these things together and more, and this is what we think of as a decentralized web. So where are we today on the decentralized web? This is a map that we started doing in 2018, way back when. Today, 4 years later, there is a lot more working code. You have thousands and thousands of companies that would be on this map. You see some of these companies have integrated into the World Wide Web browsers of today, like Brave. But I'd say that scale and interoperability are still big challenges. And there are many, many tough philosophical, ethical questions at the center of these technologies. If you take away anything, remember this: it is still very early days for the decentralized web, and all of us still have time to contribute and to influence where this technology goes. Okay, so now it is my pleasure to bring our next speaker to the fore, Brewster Kahle, the founder and digital librarian of the Internet Archive. Fair to say that Brewster is always someone looking at the far horizon to see what technology can do and how it can be used and harnessed to bring about better societies. For Brewster and the Internet Archive, our journey with the decentralized web began here, 2015 at the Ford Foundation. 5 US foundations asked people to present big ideas to build stronger digital societies. Now, Brewster's idea that he presented was to build a distributed web. He gave this talk, then he wrote a white paper, and then in 2016, the Internet Archive hosted the first global decentralized web summit. We invited the father of the internet, Vint Cerf, the father of the World Wide Web, Sir Tim Berners-Lee. And I think the idea was really that could we learn from Web 2 and Web 1? Could we learn from the mistakes of the past? Could we help the builders of the next web to do a better job than we had done the first time around? Here you see Tim Berners-Lee talking to Zuko Wilcox, arguably one of the best creators and builders of his generation. So we hosted first, before this summit, a Builders Day. And we invited 80 of the top engineers, but not just engineers. We invited librarians, open source experts, policy experts. And we started to discuss, if you had a decentralized web, what would it be? What should be the North Stars? What would be the path to make this scale? So we want to bring you up to date, and I want to invite Brewster Kahle, founder of the Internet Archive, to join me. And we're going to have just a little conversation, and then we're going to open it up to your questions. So Brewster, welcome.
Hey, thank you, Wendy, and thank you for the intro, and thank you to Metro for going and having a series of talks on this subject. It is really confusing out there, given the number of people trying to grab whatever they think out of it. I thought I could give sort of a little bit of an idea of what the need was that made it so that the Internet Archive back in 2015 really put a call out to build a decentralized web. And actually, that this is a librarian group is great, because as a librarian, it really came from a librarian focus. So let's not go forward, let's go backwards a bit. So the way that we used to work as libraries is there would be publishers that would go and publish books or periodicals, and we would buy them. And we would organize them, we would preserve them, and we would make them available to people. And we knew with this whole digital technology, this digital wave is going to be kind of awesome. And Tim Berners-Lee did a great job by making a very simple system of the World Wide Web, but it had some problems to it. And it really became obvious to us as the Internet Archive built a library on the internet. Now, how do you go and make that work? One of the big problems of the web is, instead of publishers going and making things available and having them live in many places, many libraries, many people's collections, they would live on one web server. So while there may be many web servers all around the world, any particular material really came from one place. this is a problem because, well, they want to change it. They want to update it. They want to go out of business. They want to merge with somebody. It goes away. The average life of a web page is 100 days. So we build a kludge. We built the Wayback Machine to go and snapshot websites of what they looked like and to go and try to build an archive of these. And it's become very useful, the Wayback Machine, but it's still trying to fix a fundamental bug, which is that the materials only live in one place. So you have problems like the Internet Archive is blocked in China. As is the New York Times. Every so often Russia turns on and off websites such as the Internet Archive. Great. Right now we're going in archiving Ukrainian news sites at a phenomenal clip because they're threatened. This doesn't make any sense. So all of their archives would go poof, disappear. That the URLs would suddenly go 404, document not found, if there's a change in regime. So we tried to build a kludge. So we thought, okay, why don't we build a better web? We have a lot of technologies now that Tim Berners-Lee didn't have access to. JavaScript allows you to do a lot in the browser. You can use encryption and you can go and use hash codes to make it so you can have websites live everywhere and nowhere. Imagine if you wanted to go and get a particular website and you could go and get it from many different places just by kind of like BitTorrent on the back end, where you can get multiple copies that are sold in multiple places to be able to go and make it so that you can get access to it. Think of it as sort of interlibrary loan on steroids. Could we make that work? And the technologies by that point, 2015, Mozilla had put in WebRTC, all the technologies that we've been pushing for the 5 years before that were finally in place, and we could go and build a decentralized web. What would this do for us? Hopefully it would look exactly the same as end users are used to using the web. You just go to websites and they come in. But hopefully it's more robust, so you can go and get to things even though one website is down or a piece of hardware is up or down. Good. Hopefully it's more private, so somebody can't just do surveillance capitalism on you and watch everything that you do. Wouldn't that be great? Hopefully you can make it so that people could make money directly on this new internet, as opposed to go and hosting, say, your music on iTunes or Amazon, that you could actually go and sell things from your own website and make that go. And can we still make it fun? Can we make it so that there would be fun and frolicking and weird things going on out there? Those were sort of the goals that we set for this next generation decentralized web, knowing some of these technologies could exist. And things are coming about in lumps, bits and pieces. There's some of the cryptocurrency things, which is not really central to the decentralized web, but it is helpful if we can do registration through something like a blockchain type thing. But the idea of these hash codes and sending them out is able to be done now. There's IPFS, there's storage with a J. There's starting to be some of these technologies that are coming about and working. So I think this is a good time for us to try to make sure we guide this technology towards something we actually want to use. And it's going to be a confusing time. In the early internet, there's words that were kind of misused for all sorts of things. There's agendas that were being drawn out. But it's an exciting time. So we in the library world, I think we should keep focus on trying to make robust information resources available, make it so people see things in context, that we have a game with many winners. So we don't end up with just one or two large corporations or large publishers controlling what it is we get to see, that there are tentacles. We buy things. Digital ownership in this world is absolutely critical, so that we actually own things again rather than everything being licensed. These are some of the technologies and the approaches that I think we can build into this next generation. Anyway, that's why I'm excited about this whole area coming about.
So Brewster, if I hear you right, back in 2015, you looked at the web we were on, you're saying it's not secure, it's not private. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a time axis, so you need a kludge like the Wayback Machine, and we could do better. And the North Stars that you set out, that we all set out to try and address, the reason people in this audience should care about this new technology is that it could, I'm not saying it does, but it could help with censorship, persistence, privacy, mutual benefits, where small micropayments could go to creators instead of advertising-based models. These are all great things, and it was so exciting, right, when we started in 2016. But now we're in a much harder period, aren't we? Because we got code, and the way these things grew was that instead of doing the traditional VC funding rounds, you could also issue your own cryptocurrency and fuel your growth that way. So I guess the question that we hear from a lot of people is, what's to prevent this decentralized web from being dominated by a few big players? Again, in essence, the same.
Absolutely could be. Some of the cryptocurrency problems are severe. I mean, they're real. I mean, yes, people talk about, that the global warming issue, real. But it's the centralized and wealth inequality that is built into these without Jubilee. Anyway, so there's some real problems in the blockchain Bitcoin-y world. Though, very interesting, and it has a lot of momentum. But I think we should try to keep a focus on what we want out of these that actually may not overlap with the blockchain technologies at all, which is we want to be able to go and ask for materials and have it live in many places. If we don't have that, then we don't have a robustness to our information ecology. We have to have things work that they're snappy. That it still works really well. It works with our existing phones and our existing technologies. We went and built at the Internet Archive a demo, a couple years old now, called dweb.archive.org. The idea is to try to, can we build the Internet Archive, but decentralized? And that was kind of an interesting approach. That's pretty, it tried to leverage things like WebTorrent, IPFS, GUN, some of the early technologies that try to build decentralized tech such that any particular piece of hardware or institution could go away, yet you still have access to the resources. First steps, really still, I'd say we're still in very early days in this. We may be getting dominated a little bit by the speculation in the crypto world, which may be good because there's money flowing around, but it also is very distracting. But we in the library world, I think we should try to focus on going and getting digital ownership to materials, that we should go and make it so that you can get robust access and context for what it is you're looking at. So if you're looking at a particular URL or a particular hash, what are the other comments or commentary about it so that you can present those to a user? This is what's possible by having more control on the user side than in a website or an app, even worse, that is controlled by one author, one corporation. So how do we go and build that? That's the opportunity that I'm looking forward to in the decentralized web and working with you all. The technologists, the librarians, the information producers, the authors that want to get paid. The current world is not working very well for very many players. You can see who's winning because their stock price is going through the roof. That means they're making tons of profit. Is there a mechanism to have lots of winners?
So Brewster, I want to call in Davis, who's going to bring in our audience who have a lot of questions. While she's joining us, I see a good question in here from Stephanie, who says, what can be done to enforce persistence in links versus link rot? And she's asking as a scholarly communications librarian.
I'm sorry. So the question is, how do we make things robust against link rot?
Right. How do we get built-in persistence in links?
Boy, the URL, it has a domain name in it that tells you where you're supposed to get it from. And one of the problems with that is if you don't get it from there, you don't know that you're getting the right one, right? So you have the Internet Archive's version of it but do you trust the Internet Archive's version? And thankfully people do, but I think largely because they don't have any other choice. But what would be like if instead of having a URL that says where you're supposed to get it from is a hash that basically is a number that is what the payload is supposed to be, and you could check it. So you could get it from anywhere and be able to know that you got it. So instead of the New York Times article might be a hash. And even if that came from someplace else, from some distributor, from some library, you'd know that you'd have it. So if we move to a more hash-based content identifier type system, then you're not as dependent on it coming from one trusted source. You have to know where you got your hash from, and you have to be able to update hashes, all very difficult problems. But that could give us some robustness beyond the current URL structure.
Exactly. Instead of sending you to a location on a server, its content address. The address sends you to this immutable hash that is the content. Davis, some other questions?
Yes, we have so many questions coming in. This is a very interesting topic to lots of people. So thank you both for being here and for helping us sort this out. I've got a very big question from Gina, so I'll start there. And that is, what do you foresee as the main obstacles to the implementation of this technology?
I think there's going to be a lot of status quo folks that really don't want it to happen. They're doing just fine, thank you, by going and controlling their particular corner of the universe. So I think it's going to be, at least in the early days, people that see the bigger picture. It's the sort of people I worked with back 20 years ago in the early days of the web, and then 30 years ago in the beginning era of the internet. And that there's, at least those are the people I enjoy working with. But we do have to find people that are motivated to go and try to actually get the hard work done of getting these things to work and proving out that there are many winners. Because if it ends up just being a few, we've just built the same damn thing again.
Right, that's a good point. And to your point, Google is one of those large players, and they serve to sort of organize the web. That's their language.
But I'm not sure. Yes, there are things. I kicked Google in the shins over the Google Books settlement. But the idea of what their actual Google Books project, I thought was tremendous. I think actually it's those that are controlling what it is we can read. And you say, well, isn't that Google? Is it Facebook? Yeah, kind of. But also the large publishers loom in the background. And we're having troubles with paywalls. And what does that mean when we start to segment off aspects of the web such that we can't even see it anymore? And especially some of the better works, right? The more vetted things. And are we going to end up having to link to things that are, promoted by somebody? So there's some problems coming that are not just, the normal people to kick.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. And one of those big issues, I think, in our industry specifically is with Overdrive and Amazon, and sort of removing the element of library privacy around what we're reading when we partner with people like Amazon.
Or the big book publishers. They're basically condensed down to just like 4 or 5. The academic publishers, they're just 4 or 5. These the level of power, but then it's going beyond just going and having those be sellers, because they're licensing. And this licensing problem extends into your device. Then they can take it away. I mean, most dramatically, when Amazon sold the Kindle, they sold it free with a 1984, and then they went and turned them all off. I mean, how is there reaching into your device and making 1984 go down the memory hole? I mean, boy, is that a pretty clear-cut illustration of something we should be worried about. So I think we're going to want to have publishers play their traditional role of selling, really honest to God, selling materials like they used to sell books or journal articles or whatever. And that we can go and own those as libraries, preserve them, organize them, and make them available within the normal restrictions that we've always had before. And I think that if we do the decentralized web world right, we can make it so that lots of people can go and be authors and sell without having to be involved in the publisher platforms that have been coming up.
Let's go on to our next 2 presenters, who are going to be actually showing you some of the things that Brewster and I were talking about. It's my pleasure to introduce to you one of my closest allies and partners. My Ishikawa Sutton, who's coming to us today from Los Angeles, my worked for EFF in international policy around intellectual property, so she often represented libraries. And she also worked for a year and a half at the Oakland Public Library. Right now, she's very much focused on the intersection between technology and the solidarity economy. And she comes today representing a new experiment in publishing, COMPOST magazine, where she is the founder and editor. Mai, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Wendy. So today I'm going to be talking about publishing creative works on the decentralized web with the case study of our magazine, COMPOST magazine, and our tool, Distributed Press. So this is an example of a normal blog post that is hosted on Medium's servers. And as Brewster said, if the company goes down, if a government sends a takedown order, anything happens to this server, then this website goes down and you cannot access this page. So our project partners and I, we decided that we wanted to have something where it would be really easy to publish to some of these new decentralized protocols that makes it easy for people to become peers to host this content without it being just in one place, and that it's easy for people to access content even if it's offline or if you need to have it on your own computer. And I'll talk a little bit about that next. So what we decided was to make an open source publishing tool that makes it easy to publish content on both the decentralized web and on the World Wide Web. And that as part of this project, we would actually have a pilot that is actually using this tool with real authors and artists who are writing about the digital commons. So thinking about the internet as a place where we find our identities, where we can be our whole real selves, and actually a joyful experience to be connected to people online. And to have that magazine be the kind of lab where we experiment with the features of distributed press, and so that the tool and the magazine would be kind of feeding into each other as a project. So one example that I really like to talk about is how when we were building distributed press, we realized that by the very nature of the decentralized web and the two protocols that we're working with, which is IPFS and Hypercore, that what you have to do is package the whole magazine as like a zip file. So you can't have like links to YouTube or have URLs that are linking images from somewhere else. All those images and all the files have to be packaged up and zipped. And why that is because when you put it on the distributed web, decentralized web, you are enabling that file to be copied forever. I mean, that's at least with the protocols that we're using. And so what we told our authors was, hey, you need to be okay to license your works with a Creative Commons license so that it's okay for you to put it out into the world and for others to download it, to remix it, to do what they want with that content, because we don't want people to be afraid to host this content if it was copyrighted instead of copylefted. So that's an example of the people sort of informing the tool itself. So this is the front page of our first issue that came out last year in March. And we had 10 contributors from all over the world writing about the internet and the ways in which they are thinking about the digital commons. And so you'll notice here that this is using the Agregor browser, which is a decentralized browser that lets you view content on the Hypercore protocol. And you'll notice that instead of the URL being https:// it's hyper : // and that's because it's a different protocol that it's showing you the content of the magazine. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this one. So this is a really easy way to view content on IPFS, and you don't really need to do anything besides download Brave to experience it. So this is our second issue, and our link for this on IPFS is ipns://2.compost.digital. That is a link that is a human readable version of the hash or the content ID, which you can think of as kind of like the ISBN number for the magazine. And it has a unique hash that is associated with this link that if you put it into the Brave browser, you can call that content from across the network of IPFS nodes. And what that means is it's pulling it from wherever server or wherever computer is saying, hey, I have a copy of this magazine on my computer or server. And so what's cool is if you're viewing this page on Brave, for instance, what you can do is right click on different components of the page, and it says import to IPFS, linked content, or the image. So what you can do is download, if you were to say selected image, you would be downloading the banner of COMPOST, or linked content would be all the stuff that is linked in that link, which is the home page when you click that top part of the site. And what that does is it takes a copy of the magazine onto your computer. And so then you yourself can actually view the site from your own hard drive, or you could actually be a node now on the IPFS network. So you are actually part of the network of IPFS nodes that is serving COMPOST magazine. And so you'll notice here, if you investigate the page, this is sort of like, lifting the hood here. But if you right click on this image for the cover image of our first issue, you'll notice here, it says request URL, et cetera, localhost. And what that means is that's actually pulling this image from your own computer. And so what's really great about this is if you are an offline, if you live in an offline community, if you can't afford internet, or maybe you're going camping or something and you want to read COMPOST in your tent or something, what you could do is you can actually save the whole copy of the magazine on your computer and then view it on the Brave browser as if you're viewing the magazine as a website, but it's actually not connected to the internet. So if you can imagine, so many use cases of places that are experiencing government censorship, or just again don't have access to the internet, if we could actually have ways for people to experience content offline in a way that's openly licensed, that would be amazing, and just opens up a lot of possibilities for how people can view and interact with content. So I talked a bit about the technological side of it. What's really core to our belief at COMPOST and Distributed Press is that because of the affordances of this technology, where you actually have to have people who are willing to be nodes on this network, you kind of have to experience the decentralized web as a space for solidarity, right? I mean, people told us like, hey, I really love COMPOST, so I'm actually becoming a node for your magazine, and I'm gonna, pin it to my computer so that people can download it, from me in case your server goes down, things like that. So we really, really believe that seeing all the people who are part of a network as kind of like players and stakeholders in the process is really important, because of the nature of at least these protocols where you have to like package up everything and CC license it. We really think that paying people well up front for their creative labor is really, really important, so that they're not relying on royalties to really think that they will get money back from what they're putting out there in the world and as a creator. And finally, you can read all these little subpoints, but I think one last point I'd like to mention is we really believe that having a historically marginalized people participate in the ways that we build technologies for the decentralized web is very, very crucial. We really want to make sure that we have new voices, new perspectives, and new problems to solve. And there's endless problems to solve. And to think about how we leverage the decentralized nature of these protocols to address access problems and participation problems with digital networks, I think is really, really core. And so that's why this magazine exists, and that's why we really think this way of innovating is important for us. So you can follow us on our socials here. We're on Twitter, Mastodon, Instagram. If you'd like to email us, there's our email and the links to our 2 issues. If you put the right prefix on both of these links, you can either visit them on HyperCore, IPFS, or on the World Wide Web, and check out COMPOST. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mai. I want to ask a few questions from our audience. There's a lot of concern in the questions about crypto, basically. So is this an application that does not require buying, selling, or minting cryptocurrency?
No, it does not. It does not. We do accept crypto as a way to support the project, but we've largely been funded by grants. And what we're hoping is to have new ways for people to support us as subscribers, and we really believe in this idea of web monetization. So we really would love it that in the future on the decentralized web, everyone would have like kind of a wallet. Imagine you have like, okay, I'm gonna put $10 in my wallet, and across all the websites that I visit, I'm going to give micropayments to all the ones that I visit online. And we really believe that those kind of tools to compensate authors is really a way to also address some of the issues with copyright and the control issues that come about with that, with intellectual property.
Indeed, if you go to your site, there's a little mushroom in the corner, and it means that someone like me who is signed up with Coil, for as long as I'm sitting reading your magazine, I'm feeding you little bits of micro payments, which actually do happen to be a cryptocurrency, but they didn't have to be.
Exactly.
I want to get to another question though. For Ms. Sutton, if some authors don't want their content to be able to be mixed and matched, but want it to be kept in a static, indivisible format, how do you prevent that from getting creatively reused and mixed and matched anyway?
Well, that's a big question for copyright too. I mean, I feel like a lot of how the copyright regime works is kind of based through intimidation. I mean, a lot of people decide not to remix, for instance, Disney movies because they might be afraid that they're going to get like a cease and desist letter, or, maybe be sued or something. And so, it's kind of the same concept. I mean, that's really why we think that free culture and having permissive licenses is very core to having a much more free and open web in general, just so that people aren't afraid to host content and also remix content if they'd like to. So yeah, I mean, I think it's also just tied to copyright in general.
Right. You can take anything that's copywritten on the World Wide Web and you can remix it and use it, but you're violating a law. And similarly, those same laws exist in the decentralized web. Well, thank you so much. We have a magazine that you can read on the World Wide Web, on the D-Web, where you have micropayments, and it's governed in many ways through this kind of cooperative, almost DAO-like mindset. So thank you so much. And I hope that all of you users and librarians will go and read it and make some micro donations to this great project. Okay. I want to go back to our second demonstration and introduce to you Paul Frazee. He's coming to us from Austin, Texas. Paul, has been in this game for as long as anyone, 2014. And at that very first 2016 Decentralized Web Summit, there he is front and center. He is an OG of the D-Web. He's also an expert on something called Hypercore, the Hypercore protocol, formerly known as DAT. And he has built Beaker browser, which allows you to build peer-to-peer websites on the decentralized web. Paul, welcome.
Wendy, thank you so much. And thank you, Metro, for having me here. So yeah, as Wendy said, my name is Paul Frazee, and I'm going to be talking about a project called the Beaker browser. A lot of what I'm going to be talking about, I covered pretty decently. So there's going to be a little redundancy, but that's good because this stuff is technically dense and it always helps to hear it twice. So I'm going to sort of structure what I'm presenting here from the idea of what is the Web 3.0 and give some context from my perspective as somebody that's been working on it since 2014. Really, there have been a set of innovations, much like Wendy was describing, since around 2010, some of the blockchain work, some of the peer-to-peer work, some of the cryptography that really kicked things off for the decentralized web movement for Web 3.0. And we have been basically playing with those innovations ever since. Some of it is extremely wonderful, very interesting, new possibilities, as you've been seeing, but there are a lot of challenges connected to them, which is exactly why we're in the situation we're in now, where we could talk about the Web 3.0, but we don't actually have a great definition for what exactly it is. A lot of the research is kind of happening as we go. And this has led to some pretty big open questions about what the right way to do things is. Should we have blockchains or not? Should we be using peer-to-peer technology or not? So we have the questions about the right technical choices, the right social models for how we all organize using this technology, and then one that's sometimes even easy to forget, what's actually going to be useful about this stuff. If you think of us as creating products, what's the really interesting product to come out of all this work? So the Beaker browser was started in 2016 with the goal of trying to answer what could we do that's really useful and simple for people to use that takes advantage of this first wave of innovations that had started to come about around 2010. And so that's what I'm going to be demonstrating for you here is the Beaker browser. And the basic idea was, could we have a web without servers? Whenever you want to make a website or a web application, you have to go set up a server somewhere, often on Amazon or Google Cloud or Microsoft Azure. And there's a little bit of friction to that, but most importantly, this ends up creating the situation where we're all using other people's websites on these servers, and we end up having to give up our data and give up control. So we said, okay, maybe we could make a version of the web that ran entirely on everybody's computers, where rather than setting up a server, my own little laptop or my phone could become the server, and that would be that. Well, how do we do that? The basic innovation we decided to take advantage of was peer-to-peer technology. So no blockchains are involved in the Beaker browser. And for a little bit of an anchor point, if you remember Napster or BitTorrent, it's a lot of the same kind of basic ideas that was going on back in the 90s and early aughts with those file sharing networks. But we decided to try to apply it in a little bit more useful of a way. Maybe we could get websites and web applications running. So it's peer-to-peer, which means that our computers are connecting directly to each other from one peer to another, rather than routing through some server that's sitting in between us. And so what does it give us if we introduce peer-to-peer technologies into a web browser? Let's find out. I'm going to demo a couple of the things you can do. I have at the top right a button here that says New Hyperdrive. New Hyperdrive is basically another way of saying new website. It's going to use the technology, the Hypercore protocol, to make a new site for us. So as I was saying before, I'm going to call it my cool website. So on the right side, as I was saying, we have my website as it currently exists. And there's, again, not much to look at. There's one file sitting in there, but it's basically an empty website. And on the left side, we have a built-in editor that allows us to work on the website. And again, my framing on this is what happens whenever you're able to host out of your own computer, out of your own browser? Well, the answer is that you get all the tools for building a website built into the browser. So I'm going to follow a prompt right here to create some HTML. And now my editor has dropped me into the HTML. And I'm just going to stick in hello world. And as soon as I hit save, my page will refresh and it'll appear right there. And this works exactly like you would expect out of the normal web. I'm able to create new web pages. I can embed images, create links. In fact, why don't I go ahead and create a new file here? We'll call it page2.html. And now we're looking at that, my second page. And why don't we visit it? And now I'm just going to make a link back to the home page. And I'll click on that, it takes me back to our homepage. So I'm able to work just directly in my browser on these websites, which makes for a pretty convenient flow. In fact, these slides that unfortunately we didn't get to see, I'll scroll up and you can see them here. I had all these things put together. I actually didn't have these slides ready prior to giving the talk, but I decided to go ahead and throw them up so I'd have something to remember. And I just built these right inside of the browser while I was waiting for my chance to speak here. So it really made life pretty simple that I can author content directly inside of the browser. Now, if I were so inclined and I wanted to share this website with somebody else that's running the Beaker browser, I could give them this link here. And the examples of these links that we saw before that Mai was demonstrating had nice domain names, but if you don't assign a domain name to them, this is what they look like right here. This big old line of jumbled letters and numbers. And it's kind of like, if you're familiar with the idea of an IP address, it's like the same thing. This is like the technical address that's going to refer to this website. And anybody that has this link would be able to open up the browser, and their browser would then contact my computer to download the website that I've created here. One of the interesting elements of this is that anybody can actually rehost the website, which is something that you may know from the peer-to-peer file sharing days like Napster and BitTorrent. It's the same idea here. So if somebody else were to decide to go to this website and what we call seed it, they would be able to help keep the website online without me being involved, without having to use my computer. Now, you could actually get a more user-friendly editor involved here, something maybe more like Wix, and that would probably be a good idea if the goal is to make authoring websites easy for people. We stuck with a sort of a technical approach because it's the most straightforward, but I think somebody that wanted to build upon what we've done with Beaker could very easily make a nice user-friendly version of this to be able to make website creation even more simple for people. There are a couple of other interesting things that we've been able to do. I'm going to open up another website here that's one of these peer-to-peer websites that we call Blobbity Blog. It's sort of a silly name for a kind of a simple Twitter. And what's particularly interesting about this is that I'm looking through posts by me and by Andrew, and all of this is occurring on the peer-to-peer network. This is Andrew's personal website that I'm looking at right here. This is my personal website that I'm looking at here. These are both just these websites that we created, but we were able to build an application that has no server on the back end, but grabs content from each of our personal websites and puts them together into a Twitter-like experience. So if I go to my website here and open up the editor, I can look inside of the file listing and you can actually see the individual posts that were being listed in that nice little social media app. They're just files that were on my website. And that's really how straightforward some of the application building could be, running entirely on people's personal devices, no server required. And there are a couple of other interesting things we were able to do. We were able to do things like websites that edit themselves. In fact, what I'm going to do is something called forking a website, which is basically where you make a copy of it. So now I have another copy of it and I can make changes and hit the save button. And when I refresh, those changes will stay there. Just gonna put a bunch of jumbled text in there, refresh. Oh, is it gonna work for me? Hopefully the demo gods will, there we are. And what's particularly fun about this is that there's software in the page here, which allows it to edit its own source. So whenever I'm working with this page, it's actually just using a little bit of JavaScript to rewrite itself. So the actual save button is just, I'm going to overwrite the HTML file, including the code that's inside of it. And so in many ways, this peer-to-peer model really simplifies some of the development models and some of the application models that we typically have on the web. Okay, so let us scroll back down to my slides here and talk about the challenges. Beaker is kind of a research project or an experimental browser. And a lot of the goal was to at least demonstrate what's possible with the technology, in particular to some of the more mainstream web browsers like Firefox and Chrome, so that perhaps if they have any interest, they could adopt these ideas. And I'm very happy with what that gave us, but of course there are a number of challenges, as I was mentioning before, that haven't been solved, and this is now where a lot of us are spending our time. And it has to do with things like collaborating between multiple different people. That is a major part of the challenges that come into play with these kinds of approaches. These peer-to-peer websites are very easy for somebody to self-publish with, but as soon as you want to have lots of people collaborating on one of the websites, the complexity of the technology gets a lot higher. And so that's been, since the start of this project in 2016, where a lot of the work has been going, is how do we get people able to collaborate on them? Similarly, having your devices sync between each other and have good backups gets very challenging in these models, and this is where a lot of the work has gone. Having it go to the kind of scale that we're used to with something like Twitter or Facebook or Reddit, with all these people collaborating together, how do you make this kind of peer-to-peer tech handle such large scales? It's also been where a lot of the work has been. And then some pretty typical platform friction. It's actually somewhat difficult to get applications like this to work the way you want on iOS and Android, which makes it a little bit harder for these new technologies to get off the ground. So these are really roughly all the challenges that we have been engaging with as we've worked on the DWeb and the whole idea of the Web 3.0. But the good news is that the progress seems to be going pretty well. I'm still very encouraged and actively involved in it. So I'm at least personally still happy to be involved in working on this. So that's a little demonstration of the Beaker browser.
Paul, thank you so much. I mean, as Brewster said, the key is the serverless world, which is mind-blowingly powerful. I mean, it kind of is like that HBO thing where we're just harnessing the power in your own computer to build whole websites. So your demo had so many of the things we were talking about. It had that immutable hash, right? So that we're not sending the website to a location on some server anymore. It's this hash that represents the content addressed nature of the decentralized web. That's one. Two, you did that little app where it was kind of like a homegrown Twitter. So suddenly, you know, if Twitter didn't like you, they couldn't boot you off or erase everything you said. However, if I was in that Twitter and I was saying horrible things, misinformation, disinformation, you name it, it would be very hard to get rid of me also. Correct? Right? Because there's
not in this case, because there's no, this is an interesting point that, in fact, today the Blue Sky Project was hosting a Twitter space talking about this exact question of how we approach moderation in these kinds of systems. The way that the example application that you saw works is entirely what you call sort of subjective or personally driven. So there's nobody that is pushing anybody's posts to me by their own decision. I have to go out and follow each person individually. So if there was some content there that I didn't want, I just would unfollow the person, and that would be that. That has a nice strength of having total personal control, but it also means that it's a little bit harder to discover new content because you actually have to go out and manually follow people. So a lot of the different projects have been experimenting with different ways to either sort of take advantage of each other's social networks to automatically go out in multiple hops and pull things in automatically, which Secure Scuttlebutt does. And there's also some work being done on moderation, but with kind of checks on the moderation. So the more traditional model, but with a kind of democratic governance attached to it. These are the kinds of questions I meant when we're talking about social challenges and how do we want to structure these things. Everybody's trying out their different approaches to it.
Someone wants to know, can Beaker browser be fully used right now?
It can be. It works pretty well for Mac OS and Windows. Linux, I think you can get it going, but you're gonna have to build from source. Bear in mind, it is a fairly experimental project. So, you know, there's going to be some bumps and bruises. There's no mobile version of it, but you can definitely try it out. And it's a great way to kind of get your hands on what it's like to do this stuff.
How they're saying, I'm assuming we have to go through some steps in order to be able to see websites on a browser like Agrigor. How do you How do you see websites in the DWeb?
Generally speaking, you're going to have to find somebody else that has some websites and ask them to text you the links. It would certainly be possible to set up a website somewhere to aggregate all these sites, and we played with that a couple of times, but didn't end up wanting to have to maintain it because this is, after all, sort of a small research project at this stage. You know, if you were ever really motivated, you could go out and make your own site for submitting, you know, these kinds of links to. Right now, the best way is just to ask somebody to text you their link and you'll text them theirs, and there you have it.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. There's so much more we could talk about, but fortunately, we do have 5 more sessions. So thank you, Paul. Thank you, Mai. Thank you, Brewster. I think we're going to wrap up today, but I just wanted to remind you that this is a 6-part series and we have 5 more to go. We're going to be coming back every the last Thursday of every month with a 1-hour session, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. Here are the next 3 sessions. The next one is on decentralized storage, something that all libraries really grapple with, an ever expanding collection. How do you store this stuff? And one more time, I really want to point you toward this incredible resource guide created by Alicia Diaz and Irina Nijinská. It's beautiful, but it is also packed with great links, videos, things you can use right away. If you want to become a part of this community, there's ongoing listservs you can follow. So please download this. We're dropping the link in the chat, and you can find it on getdweb.net. So on behalf of Metro, the Internet Archive, DWeb, and Library Futures, thank you so much for joining us. We hope you learned something and had a good time. See you next month.